Hi, Doug Senior here for your Live Clean tip of the day. I hate this job. Man, at this rate, I'll never get there. How am I ever going to be able to cover all the bills this month? These are all examples of stress at its best, and all of us encounter anywhere from a mild case to an extreme overdose every single day. But what most of us don't realize is the hidden danger lurking behind all the stress, and it has a name. It's called cortisol. Does that sound familiar? Well, in case it doesn't, cortisol is a necessary hormone made by our adrenal glands. It's known as our fight or flight or stress hormone. And while cortisol is necessary for helping with things like decreasing hypoglycemia and increasing energy when it's needed, overactive cortisol can leave behind a long list of damaging side effects. So think of this. When we can't keep our stress under control, we ultimately invite sickness into our life. Cortisol overactivity can lead to a list of problems as long as my arm. But since we have limited time, let's just review some key areas affected by stress and too much cortisol. One, a slower metabolism. Okay, so this is because cortisol is known to have a catabolic effect, meaning it robs the body of muscle. It does this, of course, to convert amino acids to sugar for instant energy purposes. So look at it this way. Lean muscle helps burn calories. So if you lose muscle mass, metabolism automatically slows. Cortisol can also alter metabolism by affecting our master regulator, the thyroid. That's because cortisol can cause less thyroid hormone production in the gland itself and also cause less thyroid hormone activation in our cells. The end result? Sluggishness, feelings of being tired, and even brain fog. Okay, so the next key area is the slowing of digestion. So cortisol keeps blood sugar levels high to fuel brain and muscle activity during times of stress. So to keep fueling the brain and muscles, cortisol moves blood away from high energy production areas such as the digestive tract. So why would it do that? Well, digestion isn't an essential function in times of stress. So our sympathetic nervous system, which controls our fight or flight reaction, restricts activity in our digestive tract and causes a slowing down of our digestive function. This can lead to not breaking down foods properly from lower hydrochloric acid production in the stomach and less digestive juice and enzyme production in general, which hampers the digestive process even more, making us less able to absorb nutrients from foods and ultimately leading to an inflammatory response within the gut. So think of the slowing of digestion as the potential for irritable bowel disease, irritable bowel syndrome, things like parasites and H. pylori, constipation, bloating, and a lot of other digestive concerns. And to circle back, all of this is caused by stress and that crazy thing known as cortisol. So the last key area of concern is weight gain. Okay, this is the one everyone's been waiting for. Did you know that cortisol can be the reason you can't lose that last 5, 10, 15, or even 20 pounds? Yes, indeed. Remember, cortisol's main function is to bring sugar into our bloodstream fast and in big amounts to give us our source of instant energy. However, think about this. In today's world, most of us aren't running away from the woolly mammoth like the cavemen did thousands of years ago. It's just the opposite. Most of us are sitting behind our desks, brewing and stewing over some issue with the boss, or sitting in traffic, or eating some gluten-filled meal that disrupted our gut and put us in an inflammatory, stressful response. So let's trace back to all the sugar in our bloodstream. Well, if it isn't being used to help us run away from danger, then it's just sitting there and ultimately winds up getting used as stored as belly fat. No kidding. Here's the kicker. Fat cells in the belly area actually have 4 times the amount of receptor sites than fat cells anywhere else in the body. So the long and short of it, cortisol increases fat cells and causes fat cells to expand. Okay, so now cortisol not only has the excess sugar turned into fat cells, but cortisol itself also stores within fat cells. So all of this excess cortisol, because you're not really using it if you're sitting behind your desk, instead this cortisol is going right to the belly fat cells for safe haven. So here's where it gets interesting. This stored cortisol in times of stress can deactivate within the fat cells where it's hiding, causing even more cortisol to flood your system, over and above what the adrenals are making. So now we have even more excess cortisol, and guess where that's going? You guessed it, right back to the fat cells for even larger, more robust bellies. So if this doesn't have you scared enough, this is evidence of why it's so important for us all to surround ourselves with ways to lighten our exposure to stress. And think of it. I simply covered 3 areas affected by excess cortisol. There are other problems associated with too much cortisol, like things like depression, hypertension, chronic fatigue, sleep deprivation, migraines, arthritis, diabetes, leptin resistance, sex hormone depletion, etc., etc., etc. Okay, so now how do we get this cortisol under control? Well, here are a few ways. One is the obvious. You have to control stress. Yeah, right. But seriously, it's absolutely necessary to figure out ways to bring stress under control. And remember, it comes from not just the outside things we recognize, like sitting in traffic, family issues, etc., but also from internal issues. Things like negative thoughts, bad foods that we bring in internally, or mold or heavy metals that obviously come in internally. So what are good ways to combat stress? Try to find time to practice yoga or Pilates or walk or even exercise as long as it isn't overdone. All of these can be helpful. And here's a real important one. Next, consider taking an adaptogen. So adaptogens, or otherwise called adrenals, are usually herbal formulations that are very effective at slowing down cortisol release from the adrenal glands. When I learned about these, they became for me one of those supplements that I've decided I'm going to take for the rest of my life. Adaptogens are a surefire way to help get cortisol under control. So instead of simply accepting overloads of daily stress, take the time to do something about it. Your body and your mind will thank you in the end. I'm Doug Sr. This has been your Live Clean Tip of the Day.